Three, two, one. Okay, welcome everybody. It is July 13th at 6 p.m. on the Eastern Time, and I am very pleased to have Thea Perales with me today. It's just my honor and my pleasure to speak with you to talk about Tabi Tabi Po, which is her contribution to Galleon dreaming. And so, how this will work is we'll have a brief introduction and learn more about Thea, and then answer some of your questions. And then, yeah, we'll have the release date January 1st, 2027 in North America. So welcome, Thea.
Hi, nice to meet you finally.
Wonderful. So here's a brief introduction about the author. So Thea C. Perales was raised in British Columbia, Canada, and her family immigrated from the Philippines when she was less than 2 years old. And as a child, she would get in trouble for wanting to read a book instead of playing soccer during recess. She'd spend her days dreaming of new ideas for future books and stories she wanted to write one day. Thea completed her undergraduate degree in English literature and is continuing her pursuit of higher education to one day become a university professor. Tabi Tabi Po seeks to deconstruct colonial influences in Philippine mythology while navigating a maternal relationship of adoration and understanding. Through the support of her loving family, Thea is able to create work that helps her connect to her Filipino identity. And like many kids that grew up away from where their parents came from, Thea always felt out of place. And writing gives her a sense of belonging. And she hopes that other people who may also feel out of place find some community with her work. And you can find her social media at tays.reads. That's tays.reads on Instagram. So welcome, Thea.
Hi, yes. Very glad to be here. Very excited to talk to you about myself and then also just about where I'm from, my background, and about the book as well.
Well, awesome. Do you want to do a quick icebreaker? So, is there any kind of film or book or song or kind of art movement that you're currently really interested in? And if not, where would you go if you were in the bookstore? Like we're in the bookstore and we're getting ready for the reading. Like where are you in the stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, I think right now I am doing a graduate level class that's entirely on Lord of the Rings, which is really exciting because I've never watched or read Lord of the Rings. So that's been a very fun summer end of term kind of course. It's just very much all Lord of the Rings you can think of, adaptations, the books, the movies, the plays. So that's kind of where I'm at with my current interests. But when I do go to the bookstore, I almost always check out the horror gothic section. I always try to find my way into there and seeing what they have with horror books, specifically body horror or feminist horror. And that's kind of been my favorite and my main gravitation when I do go to bookstores.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a reflection of the times that we're in and a way to cope. So, very much so. Right there with you. I would love to talk with you. We chatted a little bit about this, but your experience about growing up in North America. So I shared with you. I was raised in Canada and then in Southern Florida and then in San Diego. And my parents as well, same as yours, came away from the Philippines and raised me away from that. And so to some extent, I would feel like writing connects us to culture, right? So yeah, why don't you tell me a little bit about what that's like growing up in North America and then coming here?
Yeah, 100%. I do feel like for a lot of us who do grow up, especially at a very young age coming into Canada, it's so striking with the differences of when I talk to my cousins in the Philippines, how their childhood is like growing up. It really is different in a lot of ways of culture and the ways that you act and the ways that that you're raised. And I think for myself, moving to Canada, I was fortunate to grow up in a very, very Filipino strong community. But obviously, with a lot of that, when you do grow up in a very tightly knit Filipino community, there is that sense of hierarchy that comes with being not Filipino enough, with being too whitewashed, with being called an alien. So there is a lot of that own self hatred or just self insecurity that I know I personally had a lot growing up, and it was very hard, especially in schools, when it's predominantly like white students, they do make fun of you if you have like a bit of an accent when you say certain words. But then it's hard when you go and you talk to relatives and they're like, you're not learning the language enough, you're not speaking this well enough, like what's going to happen. So it really did help with like my own personal journey with accepting that I don't have to prove to anybody that I'm Filipino enough. And writing really does help with that, because with reading, you see a lot of the culture and the history through there, more so than what you could get from just trying to talk with your parents about it, who are also just trying to make their way in Canada and just trying to survive here without their own family. So reading kind of did become that safe space for myself to try to find where I belonged and things that resonated with me. And I think a lot of when I do my own personal fiction writing, I do try a lot to incorporate that sense of feeling out of place, because I feel like it's very, very applicable to a lot of different people. And for myself too, I like to write stories that have characters, that have people there who are people that I wish I had more of when I was younger. Because obviously, when you do get a lot of books in the libraries, it's very Eurocentric, it's very like American, Canadian centric in the terms of for white experiences. So I do appreciate growing up with some forms of fiction that did have some Asian backgrounds or just Asian characters too, because I feel like that's really integral to talking about your own experiences and just like growing up in general, having that belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. You can take an entire class on ladder, but you may not yet, or maybe in a year or two, be able to take a class, an equivalent class in Filipino literature. There are teachers in our community who are offering you poetry and short story and fiction exploration, psychology. So I'm really pleased about that. And we can't wait until that's up there on the curriculum with the Lord of the Rings class. Could you tell me a little bit more about your academic process? You're one of the authors and contributors who also have a kind of a strong academic background, and I find it interesting that people are researching but then also processing through fiction.
Yeah, like so I graduated with a bachelor's degree in English literature. Thank you.
Congratulations.
And I am currently finishing my master's in cultural analysis and social theory. So a little bit about that. It's very much a combination of like sociology and philosophy. It's very heavy with theory based, and it's very heavy with kind of doing field research in terms of doing writings or academic papers. So it was quite a huge like turn from what I was usually used to with doing literary analysis and doing more literature writing based papers, because I had to dig a lot into the actual culture of people, not just from stories. So it was very out of what I was used to, but it really did teach me a lot about like how people think, how people work, more so than just from the stories that I would read. And it really did help broaden a lot of that experience for myself. One of the tougher things with, I think, a lot of people who do education in Canada or even in the US is that a lot of academia is very, very, very Eurocentric focused. So it is really hard trying to break in and bring in culture from other parts of the world, specifically from like Asian or just Southeast Asian culture in general, just because a lot of people tend to not understand even the difference between Southeast Asian and East Asian, which I'm very much like, it's very, very different cultures. It's very different experiences. So it was a bit of a challenge bringing that in within my own master's program to try to say like, hey, I don't want to just talk about, you know, what the experience is for the average like white person walking down the street. I want to write my own experiences. I want to do my own research in that sense. And I think doing that forward with Filipino culture being so heavily invested with oral storytelling, it again does serve as a big problem with trying to find written academic peer-reviewed sources that do reach the level of what the academy is expecting when producing research papers. So that's been one of the challenging parts, was trying to do that. I was fortunate enough to have a other Filipino classmate in my program, in my cohort, which was very, very rare, considering not a lot of Filipino people I know have pursued higher education, just in general, financially, personally, with terms of preferences even. So I was very fortunate to have them and to even lean on them with support and working with them too in our classes to kind of bring in Filipino culture in a very, very Eurocentric focused kind of program. So that's been one of the biggest things. And I think, like, you know, community will always find each other.
Yeah, and maybe it's an opportunity to do your own field research and capture some of the oral traditions, because honestly, if it hasn't been prioritized in the past, there wouldn't be the written record. And if the written record is the source for this type of academia, then we'll go find it and, you know, find those stories from people, especially in the oral storytelling tradition. I was reading about a group of people who don't have concepts of far, far past or far, far future. It's only small and large and in the now and verbal, like exactly what happened, what they witnessed with their eyes. So they're incapable of telling, you know, lies, deception.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's our language shapes our culture, our values shape our stories, and then the way that we learn, even the concepts that we can hold in our own minds of what constitutes familiarity or community or friendliness or um, obligation. You know, those are very different concepts. And honestly, I would feel like we can have definitely more. We can have lots more of Filipino culture to put on the shelves and to study and to learn about. So thank you for doing that. Well, we are understanding kind of different themes and tropes, and I would love to hear from you about what you are continuing to explore in your work, because there's oftentimes like recurring things that you might want to study. Are there recurring ongoing themes that you find yourself wanting to go into? You talked a little bit about it, but you want to go into it some more?
Yeah, I do. Obviously, other than just, like, you know, having that sense of belonging, one of the biggest things that I have been focusing a lot with, like, my own personal academic research when trying to get my application ready for PhD is very much body horror and how that works and how that translates into media. I was very fortunate to be in a future presentation online conference that's based in the UK. I will be doing this presentation on a paper that I wrote for one of my other graduate courses with the amazing director of my program. And essentially, it is on understanding how aging women's bodies are villainized a lot in media and a lot in literature itself. And so that's one of the biggest things that, like, I kind of want to focus on too, especially just with having double standards or even just beauty standards from, like, Canada, growing up here, and then also within Asia and the Philippines specifically. There's a lot of nuances with talking about colorism and talking about, you know, your body, your physical size, your stature. And a lot of it too, the way that when I talk to any of my relatives in the Philippines, I know they mean well, but whenever they talk to me, it's always like a backhanded compliment kind of thing. And I think a lot of us can like relate to that experience as well, with them like pointing out these different things. So I think one of the things that I do want to focus on a lot more in the future with more of my writing is talking about like that body horror and how that really does affect the way that we view women, the way that we view like specifically aging women, like how women get older and things change, even from just like teenage to now. I'm like turning 25 next week. Like, even though I know that's fairly young, there's such a stark difference with comparisons from my body at 15 to my body now at 25. Even though I know it's not that huge of a difference to a lot of people in society, a lot of people do make comments and say those things. Like even social media, when you see like celebrities online, it's such a harmful rhetoric that does get pushed forward a lot with people in this obsession with like appearances, and even how it plays out in movies and film. And so I do love focusing on that, writing on that, and even just picking it apart, analyzing it. It really is not the fear of aging itself, but rather the fear of what aging could no longer offer to society. So it's a lot of these different things. I always say it's very neoliberal. If you can't, provide like a good benefit to society, then it just doesn't matter. And it's like, well, that's not the case, So a lot of that, I bring in a lot of the theory that I did learn in my master's into literature, into analyzing it and taking it apart. So that's kind of one of the bigger themes that I do want to go into and just look more into and talk about a lot more.
I definitely think a lot of folks would be very interested. And I myself am, in menopause. I have had my children. I'm no longer young. Where is my place in society, right? Especially as somebody who's not in the mainstream. So how does that work? And I think that you particularly are uniquely positioned to be able to understand, from the Asian, Southeast Asian, Filipino side, and then also inside the North American side. So that's a very interesting, I think you can mine quite a lot of research and ideas and stories from that. It's very exciting. Well, 2 more questions coming up. So what message would you like your reader to leave with, long after they've turned the last page of your story?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that always be kind. I think that's like one of the biggest things. I think just stepping forward with empathy really is something that I think, especially now, especially with how things are, just even in the Philippines and even in North America, I think a lot of people need to go about life with a lot more empathy, a lot more understanding, because we can't just assume the way that people act based off of like appearances and assume their kind of character. I think like it's important to try to understand each other and to speak with one another a lot more. And also too, I think for younger kids in schools, I think it's important for them to know that if people are different from you, if people look different or have different food or say words differently, that doesn't mean that they're a freak or that they're a weirdo. Like, it does come with trying to understand that people have different cultures, and it's okay to be a bit uncomfortable or awkward, but it's about how you handle those situations and how you go about it. So I'd really love for people to, again, like, always lead with love, lead with empathy. That's what my mom always tells me. She always like pushes that for me. And it is hard when you do have like Filipino stubbornness, and it's really hard to try to do that a lot of times. But I think that's one of the biggest things with stepping forward in life and just going about from when you're out from the page, like, what can I take with this with me moving forward to be the best version of myself for everyone around.
Yeah, I think for the comments that we all hear from our titos and titos, they're coming from their own situation, their own generational trauma even, and that informs how they behave with the world. We have an opportunity to make something new. And I think reading and writing develops that empathy muscle. You have to put yourself into someone else's situation and understand the world from their perspective. And I think with the body horror, that's even another layer, like, why is this happening to me? And realizing we're all the same underneath, right? Just certain things are different. So really, really wonderful. Well, okay. So tell us a little bit about your next project. Is there anything that you can share? Or is there any new creative works that you're working on?
Yeah, I do have a short story that I've been writing. It is going to be one of my longer short stories that I've written, and I'm like in the process of doing that. And that kind of, again, takes with aswangs in the Philippines and then applying this into this kind of generational kind of story. I know from where I was, my mom was raised in the Philippines in Ananii. She would always tell me that her whole province is very much filled with like mystical, kind of like those magical creatures. And so I've really tried to tap in a lot into that personal side of growing up, having my mom and even like her own relatives, her own cousins say how they have like all these spiritual or magical kind of experiences. They have their third eye opening, all these different things. And so I've tried to incorporate that a lot into a story that kind of reflects that personal angle for myself. And even with just talking about the relationship again with like mothers and like maternally, I think that's something that also has helped with like understanding myself, and also helped with making my relationship with my mom like much closer, bringing those characters in, having that kind of mirrored. So that's one of the bigger short stories that I've been working on. My next bigger thing would mostly be preparing for PhD applications. So hopefully everyone can wish me luck with that. It is a bit tricky, and it is very gruesome with trying to apply, but I do have a lot of support from professors from my universities, and I do have a lot of support from friends and family as well. And just getting that ready, obviously, just getting my work out and my writing more forward out there so that people recognize my name a little bit more, but little steps to get there. But yeah, I'm very excited going forward with a lot of upcoming things that I do have with this publication specifically. Very excited. So yeah, I think it's just anticipation for what the future has for me.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm just so excited. I know that all of the studies that you're going to be doing and the source matter and being able to publish more both academically and in fiction is going to help more people feel less alone, like you said, and feel more like they belong and not that they're strangers anymore. So I wish you all the best. And thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you're listening in, you can find Thea at Instagram, TAYS.reads. Don't forget the dot. And yeah, we'll look forward to reading your story in January. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.